Okay, let's get started here. So, one of the goals is to just have an educational tool on how to work with K2 or how I work with K2, and hopefully over time this will inspire some other people to begin wanting to work with this. Also, as I do things, I come across, design decisions that I say, oh, this would be neat to talk about, but then, by the time I get around to doing a video, it's probably not the thing I'm thinking of. So it's just, this is kind of an educational tool also, or just something that allows me to talk about things. Like, why am I designing things the way I'm designing them? Or why am I building K2? So I've written out a few goals. I'm not going to try to be like super productive because I just watched a good video on the bad points of live streams, and I think they're all pretty much true. I'm really not that good of a, able to focus when I'm talking at the same time and things like that. And so we're not going to like try to be super productive or anything like that. I'm not trying to show you how good I am at this. I'm just going to kind of walk through what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So let's go to our UI here for chart density and see why am I working on what I'm working on. So I've got my data sets. I can click these and they go to the data set, and I've got this thing called contacts. So we've got to start working on this, right? So a lot of applications, you are going to have to build a list of contacts, and those contacts may have an address, a phone number, have ways of contacting them. And so why build this over and over and over again, right? Especially if you have like availability, like when is the contact available and all that kind of stuff. And then especially if it's related to alerting, you most certainly have contacts, and you need to then integrate that with your alerting. So K2 has that built in. We have a module for contacts. So we have a schema, we have some code, we've written some tests. We can eventually add an API. And the way that this is built is pretty much the way you would want to build any module that you would want to add, or anything, any kind of object that just makes sense to be a part of Core K2. Some things don't make sense to be a part of Core, like Google Charts. Not everybody needs this charting. Now there might be a K2 Charts someday, and maybe that would be actually be Google Charts behind the scenes. But right now I've got a Google Charts module, trying to keep this a little bit uncluttered. We also have an auth module for the user management and login and all that kind of stuff, which is really, for the most part, optional at this point. It's not like tightly integrated, although you're going to see an area where in a minute I think I'm going to fix in contacts that I'm requiring a user ID, and I shouldn't do that. And I shouldn't require a user ID anywhere. They should be optional, because that user ID is usually referencing a SaaS auth user ID, and that may not exist for you if you decide not to use this. There's only so many ways I can push and pull on this as I build things, and so as you build things, your pushing and pulling will expose things that need to be redesigned or fixed. So, SaaS auth is its own module, although it kind of needs to K2 auth it ought to be K2 auth, but it's a big change. It's one of those things that if I break now, it'll take me a week to get fixed, and I really don't have a week. Okay, so some of the objectives here today, just to kind of, I need to add an interface to add new contacts. So we'll go back here. Something needs to be here. These are going to be all my contacts. So you're going to come to this page, and you're going to see all the contacts that are part of my user ID, I guess. Now, this is a single user application at this point, which for enterprise type alerting doesn't make a lot of sense, because you'd literally have users and then you'd have all this stuff. But that is easier to build as a proof of concept prototype than trying to figure out how to build an enterprise app right now. When you get into enterprise app, you got to deal with entirely different levels of authentication, authorization, integrations. It's daunting. That's a lot of building an enterprise app, and so what we're going to be able to do is maybe share data sets, and so things like that in the future, maybe share contacts, something like that. So everybody have their own account, would essentially have their own view, but then you could have access to shared objects or something. But that's down the road. Just trying to build a quick version of chart density that I can use, because this is going to be more than just enterprise monitoring. It's going to be any data that I want to monitor. If I want to basically run a curl command and grep out stuff and throw it at chart density will know what to do with it and start tracking that stuff, and then I can set up alerts and stuff like that. That could be health data, that could be publicly information, it could be information that's out there available publicly. It could be server monitoring, it could be AWS stuff, lots of different ideas. So we got contacts, and we're going to have our contacts here. They'll be associated with my user ID. So all the contacts in the K2 contacts table with my user ID are my contacts. And so we could just add those contacts. And we could drive off that table. So let's go look at that table. So we have contact groups. They're set. Contacts are added to contact groups. That's another thing about contacts that you would have to build on your own if you wanted. You're going to use in a lot of applications. But right now we're hiding contact groups. We're just going to expose contacts. And one of the problems I have right now is user ID is not null, and that should not be true. So let's go ahead and change this to user ID. And we're going to say default null. We're actually going to allow this, and we're going to get rid of this constraint. Now, if this was in production, if I thought, oh, there's a lot of people using this, using K2, this would be wrong, right? Because I'd have to drop this table in order to get that new column. So what we'd have to do is we'd put it in like a patch. So we'd just say execute drop constraint. And these functions are really handy, and they're part of ArcSQL. And then I always cut and paste to try to avoid a typo. So we would do that, and that's idempotent. I can just sit there for forever. I mean, you could add a date to that. Or how about we do it like this? That way, we could put, let's do it this way. 2023, 0223. And we could just put that. That would be easy to find, but it's not harming anything to be there. So in a year, we could remove that and assume everybody's upgraded. Or we could actually then check the version, which I don't want to add here because it's just not worth it, at this point. But normally in the future, there might be, say, if version is less than. Anyway, so we're going to do that. But we would have to have like hang on a second. Be right back. Sorry, I had to calm down the basketball players who were dribbling and with an open door. So, okay, so we drop that constraint, and then we would get rid of actually, no, we would need to do an alter. So we'd have to say like, Oh, if there's a check to check a if I think there's a check to see if in ArcSQL if this allows nulls or not, and we could check the status of that and then do an alter table on it just like that. So that's how we would kind of do it. But in our case, we're just going to say no, we don't want that foreign key, and we'll drop. We don't need to drop the constraint because we're going to drop the table. So what I'm going to do is go up to the top here and drop the table. And I've actually already got this set. And I actually don't want that set everywhere. I had that set before. So we're going to do find in folder, 1 equals 1. And we got a bunch of those. We need to actually check for if 1 equals 1. So we're going to find in folder, say if 1 equals 1. And we're going to change that to if 1 equals 0. That'll switch all of them all over the place. We don't want to drop basically tables. Close tabs to write. So that is a little way, a trick I use to basically wipe things out so they get rebuilt with a new create table statement. But we do want to do it with this schema right here. Okay, so we're going to leave that there. So user ID number, context. So again, we need to allow null here. Number, default null. So we're just kind of fixing this. This is a mistake I made. And we're going to get rid of the constraint. And now what we're going to do is add an alt ID. So if I want to, user ID is fine, but I might want to associate, say, a contact group with something in my application called a data set. So a data set maybe has more than one contact group. And so what we're going to do in order to have a reference that we can look in this table and know, show me all the contact groups with this data set ID, I could store that locally on my side, or I could store it here. So I just want to make it a little easier. So we're going to do, we're going to add contract group, and oh, I've already added alt ID. Oh, I did this. Actually, I did this yesterday. So we don't need that there. But we don't have it in contacts. That was the problem. So we're going to add contact alt ID. It's going to be a number, default null. And that table is going to get rebuilt when we run this. So now we need to go look at contact, belongs to contact members. Okay. So now we're going to go look at our code for this module. Because we're probably going to want to, yeah, I've got the alt ID here, but we need to add it here. So our create contact, we might want the option of passing in create contact, pcontact alt ID in number default null. Cut and paste that because I'm about to go find the body for create contact. And there it is. And the user ID, I also want to change those to default null now. So I'll go back to the header. Whoop, wrong header. Default null. And okay. And so now we need to also update the insert here. Just going to highlight those and format our SQL a little bit so it's a little easier not to get confused. Everybody likes to format their SQL a little differently. Some people are very, very opinionated about that. Notice I like mostly lowercase coding. Some people like uppercase. I hate uppercase variables. All uppercase variables comes from the bash days, shell days, but it was popular in PL SQL too. And let's see, yeah. Okay, this is where you lose your frame of contact. Okay, contact alt ID, and then contact alt ID. And I think that's all we need to test there. And then let's look at contact test. What are we doing? Delete from Arc SQL log, create the test package, some variables. I don't dare run this right now and see if this works because it wouldn't, probably. SAS auth package deleted. Okay, so this can all be replaced now. I've actually got something in K2. It does this. It does that. And this, we can just say execute K2 test.setup. And that will recreate this app test user. Drop it and recreate it. And then down here, I bet, yep, I can get rid of all this with app K2 test result or results. Let's see. K2 test result. So that'll run a little SQL and give us our test results quickly, a little summary. All right, so create a contact group. All this should work. Should we give it a try? Let's give it a try. So in order to do this, we need to go to K2 install, and we need to run. And because I'm dropping this table, I could blow some stuff up here. But let's try to run our contact code. Column not allowed here, 110 K2 contact. Column not allowed here, P contact alt ID. So one thing I want to do is not get carried away. Debugging. Usually I'm missing a comma or a parenthesis, or I put a function in here that can't be used. Contacts. Let's look at our contacts and see if that change actually picked up. We just do a describe contacts. Contact alt ID number. Contact P contact alt ID. Contact alt ID. What is it not like? What does it not like? 99110. Okay, I did format the SQL. Right there. Look at that. Okay. Missing the D on user ID. Okay, so that works now. Should be able to run it again. Maybe someday we'll automate these tests, but we're going to go ahead and just run it manually. So we're going to open. We're already in K2 lib K2, so we're going to go to K2 contact tests, and we're just going to press F5 and see if this works. Okay, so we definitely, we got some errors. And why are we getting errors in stat process? Okay, actually those might be. Oh, you know what? The dropping and creating this user is calling the chart density code, which is causing issues. So this won't work right now because the chart density code is broken. So not for long. But like I said, I don't want to get bogged down in debugging stuff. So I'll come back to that. Okay, so let's do this. Let's add the available truthy field to context. So let's enhance contacts. We'll We'll come back to that. We've got 5 minutes here. And let's come back to our contact schema, knowing that we're going to do a complete drop of these objects every time we run this. And we're going to go to contacts and we're going to add a feature. And so, you wonder if AI just heard me, because this is what truth cron values are allowed below on the 3 is underscore columns. It's actually just seeing, it kind of knows what I'm going to do, but that's not actually what I'm going to do. But what would it add? Oh, is enabled. Is the contact enabled? Okay. Is SMS disabled? I think it's borrowing this from somewhere in my code base. Is email disabled? So those aren't really the functions that I want, but you can use AI just to help get ideas. Like, it gives you ideas. Actually, some of them are like, oh, that's a good idea. If you're wondering what this execute SQL is, it is a wrapper that I've used for years where I can like suppress an error with that true or false. And the fact of the matter is I've used this a million times and it's always been false. So that could just change to an execute immediate. And someday I might do that. Or if somebody wants to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to grab one of these files, these schema files. I'm going to clone the repo, and I'm going to change the execute sequence to execute immediate, and maybe implement the new queue style text, whatever escapes, and do a merge or pull request. That would be a really cool way to get started doing some development. That's something that would be very helpful. I bet I could get ChatGPT to do it, and that's the kind of thing that I'm already paying $10 a month for Copilot. I would definitely be willing to pay $10 or $20 a month to ChatGPT already for what I've been using it for. I'm using it almost daily now to write some, especially CSS and stuff like that for me, and it's helping me learn CSS. Like, I can ask it questions and it'll tell me. Like, I can look at the. It's amazing. It really is amazing. Okay, so what I want to do. This is too complicated. We don't want to start with this level of complexity. We're just going to kind of go put that there for like food for thought. But what I want to do is put active or is active. Let's do is active. And that is going to be a varchar 232. I've been trying to use like 32, 64, 128, 256, trying to standardize my sizes. I don't fret too much about oversizing stuff. Fixing that would be a good problem to have. You're not introducing too much technical debt with field sizes. It's fairly easy to go back and fix that. So we're going to do that, and I hate uppercase, so default Y. And the cool thing about this is you can use, like, if I wanted to, we could do that. So we could say is active. And then you could have is out of office. Right? So this would be kind of the same thing. Only a minute left, so I'm going to wrap up. So the issue there is like you're checking two things and they can conflict, right? It could say, hey, he's active, but he's out of office. So in this case, we'd say, well, out of office overrules active. So I could set my active hours, but then does that mean, and I might go just a few minutes long, my active hours for the contact, and that would be totally not active when those hours are not true. If I'm active all the time, but I'm out of office Saturday mornings, then that would override. So that would be like a negative, and so your code would need to check for that. And so we will want to write that code to do that. Now the question is, we have more than one way of being contacted here. So I might be cool with emails, but don't want texts. And right now this is a SMS text address. So another module, and this would probably be a module that would be outside of K2, would be various integrations with text providers that I can just write a simple wrapper. We would want that like really easy for at least one or two major providers. So that's a to-do, but for now, SMS email addresses, I think they still work. Like I've got an email address for my phone number basically, and it'll text me. So we may want a window when SMS, your SMS or your text address, and I think I'm going to change that to text address. We still call it text, right? We'll call it text. I hate SMS. But we could, we want when is your SMS address active or inactive? I don't know if we want both of those. This is where it gets kind of cluttered. But your email address, basically, I just assume that one's like always active. I mean, it's kind of silly to shut off emails. You shouldn't be getting so many emails, or you should be able to set up email rules in order to route emails and things like that when you don't want them. If you're going to disable email, you're pretty much not available, so you would just put your out of office on there. But the SMS or the text address kind of is a special thing because, I don't mind getting an email at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I don't always want to get a text at 3 o'clock in the morning. And what this doesn't cover on that, though, is what happens to messages that you're sent that you don't get because you're, say, out of office. So you can have queuing where, emails queue and your texts queue, and those are sent when you become available. So that is, that almost becomes another feature, and I've done this before, so I've already written this before, I just haven't written it here. And the problem, and the different things can dump the queue, like the size of the queue, or how long has the oldest item been in the queue, or like a critical thing just dumps the queue because they already know, look, I already texted you, so I'm going to dump your queue anyway, that kind of thing. The problem becomes when you have that system and then this system, then you start to go, okay, what is the order of, how am I going to evaluate all these different options, the states, and how is the user going to understand this? This gets hard for the user to understand. So, or it gets hard to write an interface for. And so we don't want to get too crazy here. We want to keep this fairly simple, kind of make it optional. And then maybe you can use one system. If I build another system in the future, then maybe you can say, oh, this contact uses that system and not this, and it's, this doesn't show up or something like that. But that is, I think I've gone well over here. So that's kind of like how we think about design in K2. Like, what are we doing with this object? What do we need? What I'm actually going to also, the whole thing that kicked this off is, I think I'm going to need to add some more kind of generic attribute columns, because when you create a contact, there may be things in your application that you want to track with that contact that I'm not tracking here. So I need to have some generic fields that you can add to, or what ends up having to happen is you have to create your own contact table. You use the contact system, and you have to have code that synchronizes between your table and the general contact system and stuff, which isn't that hard, but there's anytime you put a interface in an app like this or something like that, a framework, you've got to, it's not going to have everything you need, and you're going to have to figure out how to extend it without, writing your own thing. So, all right, well, hope that was helpful. It's not so much a live stream coding, but a live stream of how we think in K2 terms and why we're doing what we're doing. So. All right. Thank you for watching.